You don't need enemies when your own mouth is quietly working against you. Somewhere right now, someone remembers something you said. Maybe casually, maybe emotionally, maybe when you thought it didn't matter. That joke you cracked, that frustration you vented, that secret you trusted to the wrong ears. You moved on, but your words didn't. Because words don't disappear. They linger. They get replayed, reframed, weaponized. History is littered with people who weren't defeated by lack of talent, intelligence, or ambition, but by sentences they couldn't take back. Empires collapsed because someone spoke too freely. Careers ended because of one emotional outburst. Relationships imploded because silence came too late. Machiavelli warned about armies, betrayal, and power. But his most dangerous enemy wasn't outside. It was the mouth. The one thing that reveals your weaknesses before anyone asks. In this video, we're breaking down 10 everyday situations where your own words quietly sabotage you, often without you even realizing it, drawing directly from timeless psychological power dynamics. And Machiavellian Insight 10. Situations where your own mo. Stay with me, because once you see these traps, you'll never speak the same way again. Quick pause. If you're finding this interesting already, tap like, subscribe, and share this with someone who talks a little too freely. Also, I'm curious. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your country, city, or time zone in the comments. I actually read them, and it helps the channel more than you think. All right, let's get into it. Anger feels powerful in the moment. It feels honest, almost righteous. Like finally saying the thing you've been holding back. But psychologically, anger is not strength. It's a chemical shortcut that shuts down your internal filter. When anger spikes, the brain deprioritizes caution and replaces it with emotional discharge. That's why, in heated moments, people suddenly tell the truth. Not the whole truth, but the unfiltered, undisciplined version. Every buried resentment, insecurity, suspicion, or fear comes rushing out, not because it's strategic, but because your mind has lost its gatekeeper. And here's the uncomfortable reality most people miss. The person who provokes your anger isn't just annoying you. They're extracting information. Consciously or not, they're learning what triggers you, what hurts you, and where your emotional weak spots live. Anger turns your mouth into an open file. The louder and more justified you feel, the more predictable you become. Once someone knows what makes you snap, they don't need to overpower you. They just need to press the right button. That's how manipulation begins. Not with control, but with reaction. And the most dangerous part? You often feel relieved afterward. You think you stood up for yourself. Meanwhile, the other person walks away with clarity about your values, your limits, and your emotional thresholds. Your moment of release becomes their long-term advantage. This is why powerful people don't explode publicly. They feel anger just as intensely, but they process it privately. They understand that rage is temporary, but reputation is permanent. Once words are spoken in anger, they don't belong to you anymore. They belong to whoever heard them. And those words get replayed out of context, retold without your emotion, and remembered long after your justification fades. Psychologically, observers don't remember why you were angry. They remember how you behaved. That's the record that sticks. The irony is that anger often feels like control, but it's actually surrender. You surrender timing. You surrender framing. You surrender leverage. Silence, on the other hand, creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is power. When you don't react, people project. They guess. They reveal themselves instead. That's why restraint is so unsettling to others. It denies them data. Mastery isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about delaying expression until it serves you. Ask yourself this the next time anger rises. Will speaking right now improve my position, or just expose it? Because every emotional outburst trains people how to handle you. And once they learn the pattern, they can play you like a script. The strongest response isn't yelling, defending, or venting. It's control, calm, deliberate silence. That's not weakness. That's dominance with discipline. Winning changes people, and not always in good ways. Success creates a subtle intoxication, a quiet pressure to explain yourself, to be seen, to be validated. When things finally work out, when you outmaneuver competitors or reach a level others haven't, your mouth starts itching. You want credit. You want acknowledgement. You want people to know how smart, disciplined, or strategic you were. Psychologically, this is the ego seeking oxygen, and it's one of the most dangerous moments to speak. Because the instant you begin explaining your success, you stop being a mystery and start becoming a manual. Every detail you share, your strategy, your habits, your thought process, feels like storytelling, but it's actually instruction. You're teaching others how you won. You're revealing what worked, what failed, and where you hesitated. To friends, it sounds inspiring. To competitors, it's intelligence. And competitors don't applaud, they study, they reverse engineer. They look for the flaw you didn't even realize you revealed. The need to narrate your victory is rarely about generosity. It's about reassurance. You're unconsciously asking the world to confirm that you deserve the win. But power never asks for confirmation. It lets results speak and keeps methods hidden. The moment you start over-explaining, you shrink the distance between you and those trying to catch up. The most dangerous illusion is believing that transparency builds respect. In reality, mystery sustains authority. Think about it. Who feels more powerful? The person who constantly explains how they succeed, or the one who keeps winning without explanation? Silence forces others to guess, and when people guess, they often overestimate. That overestimation protects you. Talking removes it. History shows this pattern repeatedly. Leaders, innovators, and strategists who lasted didn't broadcast their thinking. They revealed outcomes, not processes. Once success becomes loud, it attracts not just admiration, but imitation. And imitation eventually becomes competition. There's also a deeper psychological trap here. When you talk too much about past wins, you anchor yourself to them. You start defending your old identity instead of evolving into the next one. Silence keeps you flexible. It allows you to pivot without explaining why you change direction. True confidence doesn't need to narrate itself. It doesn't rush to be understood. It knows that being underestimated is often safer than being fully known. The question isn't whether your story is impressive, it's whether telling it serves your future. Because the moment you turn your success into a speech, you trade long-term leverage for short-term validation. And validation fades quickly. Advantage doesn't. The strongest winners celebrate quietly, move silently, and let others talk themselves into irrelevance. Alcohol has a reputation for revealing the real you. But psychologically, that's a comforting myth. What alcohol actually does is far more dangerous. It disables the mental filters that protect your long-term interests. The thoughts don't suddenly appear. They were already there. Alcohol simply removes the internal security system that normally asks, "Should I say this?" Each drink lowers inhibition, narrows foresight, and increases emotional trust in the people around you, whether they've earned it or not. That's why conversations over drinks feel deeper, more intimate, more honest. And that's exactly why they're risky. Under the influence, people confess fears they've never articulated, frustrations they've never voiced, and strategies they've never planned to share. The environment feels safe, friendly, temporary, but the information isn't. Someone sober, observant, or simply better at self-control can walk away with a psychological profile of you in one night that would normally take months to uncover. This is how personal leverage is created quietly, without confrontation. You think you're bonding, they're collecting data. And in a world where every phone is a recording device and every memory can be selectively retold, intoxicated words don't stay in the moment, they follow you. The real danger isn't dramatic confessions, it's subtle admissions. A sentence about your doubts at work, a joke that hints at dissatisfaction in your relationship, a casual remark about money stress, ambition, resentment, or insecurity. Alone, they seem harmless. Together, they form a narrative, one you didn't intend to write. And once that narrative exists, you lose control of how it's interpreted or used. People don't forget what they learn when you're vulnerable. They just wait for the right moment to remember it. That's why disciplined individuals treat intoxication as a strategic environment, not a casual one. They either limit exposure or limit speech. They understand that clarity is power and confusion is weakness, especially when stakes exist beneath the surface. This isn't about paranoia, it's about awareness. Not everyone listening is malicious, but not everyone listening is loyal either. Alcohol collapses social distance too quickly, creating trust before proof. And trust without proof is a liability. The strongest players don't avoid connection. They choose timing. They know that some conversations should only happen when the mind is sharp and the consequences are visible. Because what feels like honesty in the moment can become regret in hindsight. And regret is expensive. Silence costs nothing. Control costs effort. But careless openness, that can cost you everything you haven't lost yet. Pressure has a way of stripping people down. When deadlines close in, expectations rise, and the margin for error disappears. The polished version of ourselves starts to crack. Under stress, the brain shifts into survival mode, and survival doesn't prioritize strategy, it prioritizes relief. That's why people talk too much when they're overwhelmed. They vent, they confess, they explain, they reveal things they normally keep contained, all in an unconscious attempt to release tension. Psychologically, this feels like seeking support. But functionally, it's information leakage. You're not just expressing stress, you're advertising your weak points. You reveal what you're unsure about, where you feel unprepared, and what you fear losing. To the wrong listener, that's not empathy fuel, it's leverage. And pressure doesn't need enemies to do damage. Even well-meaning listeners remember what you say when you're breaking. They quietly recalibrate how competent, reliable, or resilient they believe you are. The tragedy is that stress feels like an excuse to be honest, when in reality, it's the moment that demands the most discipline. Because once your uncertainty is spoken aloud, it stops being temporary and starts becoming part of your reputation. What most people don't realize is that pressure is a test, not of capability, but of containment. Everyone feels stress. Everyone struggles internally. But the ones who advance are the ones who can experience chaos without broadcasting it. Power structures don't reward emotional transparency under pressure. They reward composure. When you collapse verbally, you don't gain understanding. You lose confidence. People don't think they're human. They think they're unstable under load. And that perception lingers long after the pressure passes. Worse, frequent stress confessions train others to apply pressure strategically. Once someone knows you talk when overwhelmed, they can increase demands, shorten timelines, or provoke urgency to make you reveal more. Your coping mechanism becomes their tool. The disciplined alternative isn't emotional suppression, it's selective expression. You choose when, where, and with whom you release internal strain. You process stress privately, then respond publicly with clarity. Pressure, when handled well, actually strengthens position. It exposes others who crack first. But when mishandled, it turns you into a source of self-sabotage. The key question under stress isn't, how do I feel right now? It's, what does speaking buy me, and what does it cost? Because pressure doesn't destroy people. Uncontrolled responses do. Not all threats come wrapped in aggression. Some arrive softly, carrying stories of struggle, disappointment, and vulnerability. These are the most dangerous ones. The sympathy trap works because it disarms you psychologically before you realize anything is happening. When someone presents themselves as wounded, overwhelmed, or unfairly treated, your guard drops. You stop evaluating. You stop filtering. You lean in. Your brain shifts from defense to rescue mode. And in that state, people talk. They share experiences to relate, reveal mistakes to comfort, and disclose vulnerabilities to show solidarity. What feels like kindness becomes exposure. Skilled manipulators understand this deeply. They don't demand information, They invite it. Their stories are polished, emotionally precise, and just incomplete enough to pull you closer. Real vulnerability is messy and inconsistent. Strategic vulnerability is rehearsed. And while you're busy feeling trusted and important, they're quietly mapping your fears, limits, ambitions, and weaknesses. Every detail you share to help becomes intelligence. Every admission you make to bond becomes a future lever. The trap isn't sympathy itself, it's unearned intimacy. When emotional closeness forms faster than trust should, it's almost always a signal. The deeper danger is that the sympathy trap flatters your identity. It makes you feel perceptive, compassionate, indispensable. You're not just listening, you're chosen. And that sense of importance clouds judgment. You forget that power doesn't need your help unless it's buying something. True strength rarely advertises helplessness. It seeks solutions quietly. When someone's vulnerability feels perfectly timed, perfectly expressed, and perfectly aligned to draw information from you, caution is warranted. This doesn't mean becoming cold or detached. It means separating empathy from exposure. You can support without revealing. You can listen without matching disclosures. You can offer guidance without narrating your own struggles. The strongest people maintain this boundary instinctively. They give warmth without giving leverage. Because once personal information leaves your mouth, it no longer belongs to you. It belongs to whoever decides how to use it later. Sympathy should never override discernment. In the long game, your compassion is only power if it's paired with restraint. Otherwise, it becomes a currency others spend against you. The quiet rule is simple. Help generously, speak selectively, because those who master vulnerability know exactly how to make you forget that not everyone who looks wounded is harmless. Most people think gossip is harmless. Just conversation, just social glue, just a way to feel connected. But psychologically, gossip is an exchange system. Information moves, value shifts, and power subtly changes hands. Every group has an invisible marketplace where secrets, opinions, and reputations are traded. And like any market, there are winners and losers. The losers are the ones who talk without collecting. When you share gossip, you're not just revealing facts about others. You're revealing your own boundaries. You signal what you're willing to repeat, exaggerate, or betray, and people notice. Even the ones who nod along and laugh quietly store that data away. Because if you speak freely about someone else, you'll eventually speak freely about them too. The most dangerous part of gossip isn't being overheard, it's being assessed. Information always flows upward toward power, while consequences flow downward. The person who listens more than they speak gains awareness. The person who speaks more than they listen becomes transparent. And transparency without intention is weakness. In every environment, workplaces, friend groups, families, there are information brokers who seem curious, supportive, and engaged. But they aren't collecting stories for entertainment. They're accumulating leverage. When you participate casually, you don't gain closeness, you lose position. What makes gossip especially destructive is that it feels socially rewarding in the moment. You feel included, trusted, relevant. But that reward is short-lived. Reputations, on the other hand, are durable. People don't remember every detail you shared, but they remember that you share. And once that label sticks, your words lose weight. You're no longer seen as discreet, strategic, or safe. You're seen as a channel. The disciplined alternative is quiet observation, listening without contributing, letting others reveal themselves while you remain unreadable. This creates asymmetry, and asymmetry is power. Silence forces others to fill the space, often with more than they intended to say. Over time, this positions you as someone who knows much but reveals little. That's influence. Gossipers burn bridges without realizing it. Observers build them invisibly. The key isn't moral superiority, it's strategic patience. Ask yourself before joining in, what do I gain by saying this? If the answer is temporary bonding, the cost is likely long-term credibility. In an information economy, restraint compounds. The less you trade your own words, the more valuable they become when you finally choose to speak. Few situations trigger the urge to talk more than being challenged by authority. A boss questions your decision. A teacher doubts your ability. A leader criticizes your performance in a way that feels unfair. Instantly, your mind races to defend itself. You want to explain the context, clarify your intent, prove you're competent. This reaction feels logical, but psychologically it's a trap. Authority structures don't operate on fairness. They operate on perception and results. When you argue upward, every word you use to justify yourself subtly reinforces the idea that you're seeking approval rather than commanding respect. The more you explain, the more you appear uncertain. The more emotional your defense becomes, the more you confirm the authority figure's power over you. Most challenges from authority aren't invitations to debate. They're stress tests. They're designed to see how you handle pressure, criticism, and imbalance. When you react impulsively, you fail the test, even if you're right. And the uncomfortable truth is this: being correct doesn't equal being effective. Power rarely rewards correctness in the moment. It rewards composure. The smartest response to authority isn't silence born of fear. It's restraint born of strategy. When you don't rush to defend yourself, you deny the authority figure emotional control. You shift the interaction from argument to observation. Let them speak. Let them project. Often they reveal more than they intend, about their priorities, insecurities, or limitations. Then, instead of arguing, you respond through action. Performance speaks in a language authority respects. Results neutralize criticism more effectively than explanations ever could. People remember who stayed calm, not who won the argument. They remember who delivered under scrutiny, not who justified under pressure. And once you earn that reputation, challenges diminish. Authority pushes hardest on those who react most. When you stop feeding the dynamic, it weakens. The instinct to argue is emotional. The decision to stay composed is strategic. Ask yourself in those moments, is this about being heard or about being advanced? Because you can't have both at the same time. Those who rise understand that not every accusation deserves a response, and not every challenge requires a voice. Sometimes, the most powerful answer is quiet excellence. When trust is broken, silence feels unbearable. You know things, personal things, weaknesses, mistakes, insecurities that were shared in confidence. And in the aftermath of betrayal, your mind frames disclosure as justice. They deserve it. People should know who they really are, but psychologically, revenge through revelation is one of the most self-destructive impulses there is. The moment you expose someone else's secrets, you're not just hurting them, you're redefining yourself. You become the person who weaponizes intimacy, and that reputation spreads faster than any rumor you share. Future allies, employers, and partners don't analyze the context of your revenge. They analyze the behavior. They ask themselves a single question. If I trust this person, what happens when things go wrong? And once that doubt exists, your credibility collapses. The information you reveal may damage them briefly, but the signal you send about your character damages you permanently. That's the paradox of revenge. It feels empowering in the moment, but weakens your long-term position. Secrets, once spent emotionally, lose all strategic value. True power players understand something counterintuitive. Unrevealed information is leverage. The moment you speak it, it's gone. Silence, however, preserves optionality. It keeps futures open. It allows you to decide later if and how to act. And often, doing nothing is more unsettling than retaliation. People expect exposure. They prepare for it. But when it never comes, uncertainty sets in. They don't know what you might do, or when. That ambiguity protects you. It also signals discipline. You're showing that emotions don't dictate your actions, that you don't trade long-term respect for short-term satisfaction. The strongest response to betrayal isn't exposure, it's elevation. Move on quietly. Improve visibly. Let outcomes speak where words would cheapen you. Because once you demonstrate that you can hold secrets even when hurt, you become someone others take seriously. Respected, trusted, feared even. Revenge that talks is impulsive. Revenge that stays silent is strategic. And in the end, silence doesn't just protect your power, it multiplies it. Nothing exposes insecurity faster than trying too hard to sound capable. When people feel uncertain about their value, their mouth rushes in to compensate. They explain excessively. They name drop. They overqualify their opinions. They interrupt. Psychologically, this is called overcompensation, but socially, it reads as desperation. The irony is brutal. The more you try to prove your intelligence, the more you signal doubt in it. Real competence is quiet because it doesn't need validation. It doesn't chase recognition. It lets outcomes create reputation. But insecurity fears being overlooked, so it performs. It fills silence with credentials and fills space with explanations no one asked for. And once people sense that hunger, they learn how to trigger it. They ask loaded questions. They challenge casually. They watch you unravel into verbal justification. At that point, your knowledge stops looking impressive and starts looking reactive. The room doesn't see confidence, they see someone who needs approval, and approval seeking is a weakness in any hierarchy. What makes this trap dangerous is how invisible it feels from the inside. You think you're being helpful, clear, thorough. But listeners don't judge competence by volume, they judge it by control. Someone who can explain complex ideas simply, briefly, and only when necessary appears powerful. Someone who explains everything appears unsure of what actually matters. Over-explaining also strips you of flexibility. Once you lock yourself into words, you have to defend them. Silence keeps you agile. It allows you to adapt without contradiction. The strongest professionals understand that being underestimated is often an advantage. It gives you room to act without interference. When you constantly announce your capabilities, you invite scrutiny, and scrutiny invites challenge. Let your work surprise people instead. Let your results speak before your mouth does. Ask yourself in moments of explanation, am I clarifying or am I performing? Because the line between the two is thin, and crossing it costs authority. Mastery isn't about sounding impressive. It's about being undeniable when it counts. When pressure rises and expectations collide with reality, the easiest escape is a promise. I'll fix it. I'll change. I'll deliver soon. Promises feel powerful because they instantly relieve tension without requiring immediate action. Psychologically, they act like emotional currency, buying time, calming conflict, restoring hope. But that's exactly why they're dangerous. Every promise creates a future obligation, and if that obligation isn't met, your credibility erodes quietly but permanently. People don't judge reliability by intention. They judge it by consistency. One broken promise doesn't just fail, it redefines your word. And once your word weakens, everything built on it becomes unstable. The trap is that promises are usually made in moments of weakness, fear of disappointment, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as incapable. Instead of confronting limitations honestly, people create fantasy futures they can't sustain. Over time, these verbal debts compound. What started as reassurance turns into reputation damage. And the more you promise, the more trapped you become. Because now silence feels like failure, and honesty feels like exposure. The most powerful operators flip this pattern entirely. They speak less and deliver more. They resist the urge to promise because they understand that restraint builds trust faster than reassurance. Understated commitment followed by visible results creates authority. Overstated commitment followed by delay creates doubt. This is why disciplined people underpromise and overdeliver, not as a slogan, but as a survival strategy. They'd rather surprise than excuse. They'd rather disappoint briefly with honesty than collapse slowly under unmet expectations. In the long run, people forgive limitations, but they don't forgive broken words. Your mouth doesn't need to solve every problem in the moment. Sometimes the strongest response is, I don't know yet. That sentence preserves credibility. It keeps your future flexible. It protects your reputation. Because once your word becomes solid, everything else follows. And once it fractures, nothing holds. In the end, mastery isn't about saying the right thing. It's about only saying what you can stand behind. Your words are contracts. Choose them carefully.